Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Overmark podcast. We got a special bonus episode for you today. We're going to be digging into it being the 1 year anniversary of the AEW showing the backstage fight between Punk and Jungle Boy and what kind of ended up being the fallout of that. And we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown about it, talk about it a little bit, and, talk about where these guys are now in the industry or where they are not, and kind of go from there. I'm Dave, and with me, as always, is my awesome good buddy.
Yep, TJ here. Um, we're going to be talking about that CM Punk fight, and basically, it's one of the most shocking, kind of crazy, wild moments that we've had in the past couple of years in the wrestling industry. Punk's always been a divisive guy, and he really was in AEW. Um, it's him and Jungle Boy basically got into a fight after some tension built over a glass spot that they had, and I think everybody kind of knows about it. We're about to dive into it. Um, so on Collision, they were going to do this spot where Jungle Boy was going to go through glass on a vehicle, correct? And Punk went in
And we,
there.
and it,
Tony Schiavone went up to him. Sorry, Tony Schiavone went up to him, and he's like, Punk, he won't listen to us. He just keeps trying to push this, and he's fighting us. Will you come up here? And Punk was kind of the guy running the show. He was basically an EVP, from what I understand. And he went up and told Jungle Boy, "Hey, we don't do that shit here. Um, that you have gimmick class that we can use for this. Why do you want to go through this?" So anyways, he kind of pushed back and was kind of, I guess, not too fond of CM Punk at that point. And there were other individuals in the back that were already not too fond of him either. The Bucks, and they were buddies with Jack Perry. So it makes sense that he kind of was rebelling against them and didn't like him. Um, Punk was kind of like the locker room leader in Collision. They had had that fight, Brawl out, um, between Punk and the Elite. So when Punk came back, they had his own show on Collision. He was basically running it, and it was obviously the locker room leader. And there's been certain situations in the past where that hasn't worked out for Punk. I remember RVD telling Punk something like, he wasn't my fucking locker room leader. but but that
yeah.
but that's basically about it. It's just all started with a glass spot, and uh,
One of the other things about it was that I think we forgot to mention is the car that he was talking about getting slammed onto the windshield was literally a rental car, and Punk's trying to tell him, hey man, we're not doing that. you know you're gonna, in addition to it being a dumb idea, you're gonna give us bad uh reputation with the rental car company, and then the boys aren't going to be able to get cars from this company anymore because some idiot got himself slammed through the windshield.
yep, he was just insistent on doing it. But after that, so like some of this is rumor, some of it's not, but we know a lot of everything about everything. We know a lot about what happened here. Sorry, I get tongue tied a lot, guys.
Oh, you're good.
So
There's a lot of NDAs and things of that
yeah,
nature. I think the only person that didn't have to sign an NDA was what's that dude? Ace Steele's wife.
yeah,
I
yep.
think is the only
She didn't
person,
work
because
for
she
him.
wasn't an employee. So
Yeah,
she's like, "Fuck you! I'm not signing nothing. You can't make me."
yeah.
So maybe someday she will kind of pull the curtain back as to what went on. But for now, we basically have the kind of the same information that everybody else has.
Apparently, there's an employee handbook, and when you sign uh, and read that employee handbook, you like sign an NDA. So everybody's got like a pre-built-in NDA in that company, I think, that isn't like higher end talent that has a lawyer that could negotiate better for him. But it was when Jack Perry like said, "Cry me a river" at that night at AEW All In, and I forget exactly like what that was tied to, but it was tied to Punk
They
in a way. What is it?
they were doing the glass spot, and you
Oh yeah,
know
then he said that right after.
he was like, "It's real glass, cry me a river."
Yep. And then obviously that's going to piss Punk off. So when they were done the match, they're in Gorilla, and Punk walks up to him, and he's just like, do we got a fucking problem? And then Jungle Boy, like, said a little bit of shit, and basically Punk kind of pushed him, put him in a headlock. They stumbled over because people tried to break it up real quick. Samoa Joe was one of them. Uh, we'll go over that in more detail too, like the whole
Understand what
situation.
Jungle Boy was
Yeah,
thinking. He's like the least tough guy, and I get everybody has their opinion about CM Punk and how tough he is or isn't based on his UFC fights. But I'll tell you right now, a guy that has been trained to fight in the UFC versus a guy that is the size of a teenager is not going to be a very advantageous thing for the guy that's the size of a teenager.
yeah. And this thing was more of a scuffle. Nobody really got hurt. It's probably more of a pride thing for Jungle Boy than anything.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
there might have been a punch or two thrown,
yeah.
but from the video, you didn't really see much.
It was a crappy little CCTV footage. You can't even hear anything. I don't know if there was any audio that they actually got. Maybe they didn't want to record that part. But um, Tony Khan was sitting right beside him too when it happened, and like he kind of got like knocked into him a little bit, and he said he feared for his life. Some weird shit. I I haven't feared for my life, and I literally had a motherfucker point a gun at me before. I don't I don't know
Yeah.
what was up
Well, I
with
mean,
that.
you remember he's a rich guy that's lived a fairly privileged life, so he probably hasn't been around too much actual violence. So maybe two dudes pushing each other and getting kind of loud was scary for him. I don't know. Maybe he's a little bit of a pussy. And I'm sorry to say that, but if dudes yelling at each other and shoving each other and a guy getting put in a front face lock and then a guy yelling at you, it makes you fear for your life. I mean,
Well, he
you're
told him
soft at a minimum.
from what Punk said, he told him that this place is a joke and I quit.
Yep.
You
And
know?
then Samoa Joe had to convince him to go because their match was literally the next
Yeah,
match because Jungle Boy was on the pre-show was what that was on, and
yeah.
then they opened the show and Punk wasn't going to do the match, and Samoa Joe talked him into it. And all the credit in the world to Samoa Joe for
He's a
being
professional.
able to, yeah. And he's
Decent
been friends
match
with
too.
Punk for a long time. Yeah, I mean they had a good match together. Every match that Punk had in AEW was pretty good. Even with guys that you would perceive as lower guys, Punk chose those guys to work with for a reason.
It's funny though too, like all those people like are just kind of standing around. Like you see some people looking at them, but like wouldn't people like walk up on this sooner, like knowing like oh man, these guys might be about to fight?
You would think. Um,
Funny
it's funny.
stuff,
I'm
huh?
actually looking at a GIF of it. Like that's how fast that the whole thing went
Yeah,
down.
it's not
Essentially,
much.
it's like it's in a GIF,
But what about the
and not to
fallout
put
on
them
this,
under.
Dave?
I mean, the fallout was crazy. Both dudes got suspended and sent home. I don't think we saw Jungle Boy on TV for what, like a year. I mean, I don't think they brought him back
I don't
until
know if it
after
was a
Punk
year,
was
but
fired.
it was a while. I remember he went to NJPW for a little bit too
Yeah,
beforehand.
and he was doing this the scapegoat Jack
Yeah,
Perry,
and
and
he
it's like,
he got a
man,
good reaction for a couple of weeks.
if if you are a lower card guy and you have a problem with the upper card guy, you keep that shit to yourself.
Yeah.
Or you figure out a way to hash it out privately. You don't be a goof, smartass, and make comments to the guy that is the biggest draw in the company and try to antagonize him.
Well,
You know,
who told him to do that? You think that this guy had this idea to do this shit? This 155 pound, 5'7" kid had this idea to like physically confront this guy. I feel like the Bucks were to some extent kind of like were hyping him up.
oh, for sure. It's just like when you're talking to your friends about anybody. Oh, I don't like this guy, and blah blah blah, and then your friends are like, yeah, fuck that
You
guy.
saw him got his ass
Do
whipped on
something about it.
TV, man. What's he gonna
Yeah,
do?
yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, though, they're telling him this after Punk has already whipped their asses backstage.
Yeah, we'll have to cover that at some point too. We're just doing this because it's the anniversary of this.
Right. Yeah. This was kind of a last minute video. It's something we meant to touch on our episode 2, but we just didn't get it in there, so we thought we'd make you guys this little bonus episode today. Um, let's see here. Looking at the footage again, it's so goofy. It happens so quick. Um,
I mean,
them
it
firing Punk was the best thing that could have happened for wrestling. He came back to WWE in like no time. He's on the
yeah,
phone with Nick Khan, and Nick Khan's asking him about like, his no compete and stuff like that. And he's like, Nick, I don't know if you know this. I was fired. I don't have a no compete. So he was pretty much there. The conversations happened. It all went together really fast. I think he signed his deal the day of his appearance at SummerSlam,
I don't know, but it's kind of funny.
or
It
was that
wasn't.
Survivor Series?
I
I think
think
it
it
was
was
Survivor
SummerSlam
Series.
because it was.
Might have
I,
been Survivor Series,
I don't
SummerSlam.
know. I just remember it was a lot going on. Like Drew McIntyre walked out all furious, and Seth
Yeah.
Rollins looked pissed. They had a big match going on. I forget what it was, but
It was like uh, wasn't it a four-way Hell in the Cell or something like that? I know it was a big cage match.
did you talk about kind of like the reaction on social media with Tony Khan about this?
No, I hadn't addressed that. You go ahead and bring that one up.
So it was, man, like he got shit on by everybody for this. I feel like he kind of did. Like, this is obviously his fault why this happened. It's all come down from the top. If you have a boss that's going to discipline you and you know that this kind of stuff doesn't fly, you're not going to do it, right?
Yeah.
We
Do
all
you
have
think any of
bosses.
these idiots would have been doing shit like this if they were working for Vince
No,
McMahon?
not at
Like,
all.
no.
Even if they're working for Hunter, they wouldn't be doing this. Because it's
And
a
also, though,
professional
Vince would
environment.
have fired the shit out of these people. Like, oh, you're starting
No,
fights with my top guy, my biggest draw. You're out of here.
oh yeah, yeah. CM Punk is their biggest, or was their biggest draw, still the biggest one they've ever
100%.
had. And he would have just like, oh, get out of here, Jack Perry, get out of here, Bucks. But I mean, beyond that point, it's kind of fucked because again, like the morale too, like what we were saying, it's like it just fucked up the morale in the company for a while, especially after they showed the video. Like you talk about the morale separate from the incident, the morale after showing the video was bad. Like
Well,
the vibe
most
around
of
the
the time,
show,
sorry.
the vibe around the show was bad, and it gave them the highest ratings that they've had. It, it still to this day is the highest rated show that they've had since they showed the footage. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like it,
CM Punk is over in two companies.
yeah, he has had the highest ratings for them since they showed that footage, and that show had the 800, I think it was like 820,000 people viewed it. Now they're getting around like 600 in most of their shows. But they fired him with just cause. They had that disciplinary committee. Apparently, Daniel Bryan was the head of it. He said he wasn't the head of it, but he was a part of it, and he was one of the people that decided in letting him go. Um, it kind of sucks because you look at it from a business standpoint and a company standpoint and everything, and like it soured a lot of stuff that they had going on. Perry, like you said, was just gone. He went to NJPW and showed up again one day, um, and they pulled that mask off of him when he showed up, and it was him. And he got decent reactions for a couple months, I feel like, but those all faded.
And
And
where is he now? You don't even see him.
exactly nowhere. But he'll be back since the Bucks came back. But he only was getting good reactions in like these hardcore matches and high spots. When he was out there having matches, he was wrestling in dead crowds. I've seen him in person before too, and like it was dead. Like nobody made a noise. The only time anybody made a noise is like when like maybe a chair came out or something like that. But I mean the guy means nothing to the show. And it sucks because he seems like he's a decent talent and everything, and he was getting a little bit more in shape, and his promos were getting a little bit better. I'm not going to say that he wasn't improving. It's just like uh, he just kind of seems like a whiny little bitch for the way that he handled this whole thing and how the Bucks kind of handled it too. And that's just my point of view. That doesn't mean that that's a fact. Uh, somebody else could have a completely different opinion on it and say Punk was in the wrong, and they probably in the right because the way to handle these situations isn't getting in a fight, right?
Yeah, that's how you could say Punk was wrong. Punk was wrong insofar as he got physical, but I mean,
He asked him what are you
every
gonna do.
yeah,
He says, all right. Anytime somebody's asked me what I'm gonna do, I usually hit him in the head or push
yeah,
him or something,
it's generally like yeah, when you get to that point, them's fighting words for lack of a better description.
Yeah, but it's funny that they have the whole disciplinary committee. They have a like conflict management now. Um, their backstage like is supposed to be a little bit different, and who knows if that's true or not. But that's basically about it on the aftermath. Just Punk's a massive star. Perry's nowhere to be seen. He means nothing to the show. Punk's making WWE millions of dollars. Perry isn't making AEW any, isn't putting any butts in the seats, isn't selling any merchandise. Just kind of funny the exact opposites there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, here's Punk headlining WrestleMania this year.
Yeah, uh, kind of nuts. Like, you think it was worth showing that footage?
No, I think that it hurt the company more than it helped the company in the long run. It disenfranchised a
It
lot
caused a
of
split.
backstage that were, even if they weren't necessarily friends with CM Punk or on his side, it wasn't a great look for the company, and a lot of the talent felt that, at that point, how long had it been since that had occurred? I think it had been like
8 months,
six,
I
eight
think.
months. So it's like, the time to have capitalized on showing that
And
would have been right after it occurred.
do you remember why this happened? Because Punk talked a whole bunch of shit on the company. So then they
Yeah,
decided they were going to release this footage.
he was in the info, and the stuff that he said, like, he was very calm during that interview, and it was fairly mundane.
It was Ariel,
But
right?
I think it was.
He was on the MMA Hour with Ariel.
It was when his arm was still hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought he was very forthright with the information. I don't think that he was overly smearing the other people involved or even
He obviously
AEW. I
wasn't,
feel
though,
like
because he would have been
he kind
sued.
of just I
Everything
feel
he
like
said
he
was
just
true.
went out there and loosely, without violating his NDA, said what happened.
Exactly.
And then
But,
when they showed the video showed what he said happened is what happened.
yeah. Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off there. I just don't want to
Oh, you
forget
didn't
this.
cut me off at all?
But obviously what he said was true because they would have fucking sued him for slander.
Right.
Right? So like it was true. Nobody sued anybody, and Punk came out of this looking like $1 million, and
Yep.
then Perry just came out of it looking like some dweeb, and again like he's nowhere to be seen now. Um, I don't think Punk's in the right for what he did here, but it's obvious that this is kind of a hostile work environment over there, and a lot of people said that. And what you just said is like the divide. Ricky Starks was caught up in this. Remember, he was working a program with Punk, um,
Yep.
and Ricky Starks talked good about him on Twitter in some interviews, and all of a sudden he's not working anymore. And
He's
they
off
eventually,
TV for
yeah,
a whole
yeah,
year.
and then now he's in NXT and he has that North American Championship and he's over and he's going to go to WWE and make a lot of money. Um, so are all these guys that have left there, but their viewership went down by like 150,000 the next or after they showed that episode. Not from their high of 800, but it's like I think they had like 500,000 the next episode. Like it made people stop tuning in, and I think that they're starting to actually recover. Their stuff's about to go up a little bit now, but it caused long-term damage for them and cost them money. And could you imagine how much better of a deal they would have gotten if they had Punk doing this stuff, and Collision was the same show it was when it came out? Because
Right.
Collision, if you remember, it was one of the best. Those first 4 episodes, it was some of the best wrestling I've seen in years. Like it was an awesome show. It had a completely different vibe than anything else that was going on in any wrestling show. It just felt fresh. You could instantly tell stuff was going on. It had that FTR versus Juice Robinson and Jay White, the best tag team match on television in history. Like most people will agree with that right off the fucking bat. No one's arguing it. You had these things happening right away when that show was made, and it was obvious because it had a different mind than somebody that has been backstage in wrestling and understands how this shit works, and is willing to learn and is willing to use other people's brains to come up with these ideas, as opposed to some guy that's just going to pick certain people that he wants that are going to feel like they agree with him and write a show that he wants. Is that right?
One of the things that I noticed you are correct. One of the things that I noticed that these guys that run these companies, like similarities between Tony and Vince, is these guys just book for themselves.
Yeah, what they like, because the people don't know what they want. Isn't that right?
And it's like, yeah, I feel like we've said this before. I think on episode one where we talked about AEW a bit. He's got guys like JR and Jeff Jarrett back there, and it's like, these guys have been through some of the highest levels of success that the industry has to offer, and
Yeah.
you're not using them as some of your creative minds. It's kind of goofy.
If I worked there and they fired Punk, I would like try to gather like a like-minded group of people. I'm sure there was a lot of them there that were afraid to speak up individually and walk up to Tony and been like, "I'm pissed," and be like, "Why?" Be like, "You just cost us all money." And it's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, I'm pretty sure we have some performance metrics on merchandise and other stuff where we're incentivized and where we're doing better, and you just fired the biggest draw in the company over this guy that means nothing. And the punks don't mean anything in the or sorry, the bucks don't mean anything in the company either, you know? And it's just it's nuts. I would legitimately be upset because there nothing positive came out of them getting rid of Punk in the way that they did. I don't think he was going to last there anyway. So, like maybe what I'm saying is kind of a moot point, but in the end, like picking who they did over him was probably one of the biggest fucking fumbles in wrestling history, and it cost him millions of dollars, and it lost him a lot of viewership and faith in people. And Tony Khan just looks like a kind of a fucking idiot.
Well, that was when I kind of started to check out on AEW, because it was like, man, you're making dumb decisions like this. I don't know that I can continue to be as invested as what I am, because up until that point it was like, you can't miss it every week.
Yeah, it
And
was
then
it
it
was
was
it was a nice because CM Punk's his AEW debut and return, it was on a rampage, if I remember correctly, in Chicago, and they sold out the place. I forget what that arena is in Chicago. It was the Bulls Arena, I feel like, um,
yeah, it was.
but it was
They sold it
amazing.
out on the rumor
Yeah, it
that
wasn't
he was
even.
going to be there. He wasn't even confirmed.
Yeah, and he's there, and it was amazing. It was one of the best returns ever. It was probably one of the biggest moments that AEW's ever had, and I don't know. It I know we're just shitting on these guys a lot here, but they made a big mistake in how they handled this, and Tony should have fired everybody involved. It shouldn't have just been Punk at that point. Like when Hangman went out on TV that first time, I know this is separate from what we were talking about, and we'll have to go over the Brawl out another time. Hangman should have been gone. You know, like I know he's a fan favorite, but is he making anybody any money? No.
Yeah. Oh, you're
Uh,
going to go into business for yourself with our top guy? You're out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Get your shit and get,
yeah, but
like my Uncle Rob used to say.
yeah, but one of the things we kind of had here is like, was AEW right to fire Punk? We went over that a little bit. Yeah, I feel like they were. Should they have? No.
Definitely not.
That's
No.
pretty much it, right?
Yep.
That's straightforward. Like, there's not even much that we could really go on about that. Should they have? Yes. Um, should they have really though have because of other reasons? No. But it is what it is. And then
Yeah.
1 year later, AEW hasn't really been the same, right?
No. And we're still feeling the impact of that night and the fallout of it. It wasn't just a shift in the company, it was a shift in the company's entire identity.
Yeah, I mean
And it
they're
led to
in
people not taking them as serious anymore.
they're getting a little bit better, but I mean there were some times here within the past 6 months where they were in front of like 1,800 people. They're regularly in front of 2,000. They're getting a little bit better now. The crowds are like 3,000. I think being on Max has helped them a little bit because they have a little bit more exposure. So some people are going to the shows a little bit more now. But um, man, it's I I've been to the shows and they're not high energy shows. It seems like AEW doesn't really have any momentum, and a lot of that had to do with this, and they definitely haven't recovered from it since. And I feel like they're finally starting to come out of it a little bit now, but the company just still has no direction, and that doesn't have anything to do with Punk, but
Yeah.
um, they just I don't think they're ever really gonna forget this event, and I know we won't, and just something that we wanted to talk about a little bit since it's the 1 year anniversary of the footage, and I'm glad we went over it, and it was a fun topic.
Yeah, thanks for checking out our little special episode here today, everybody. And was cool making it for you. TJ and I are having a good time doing this. It's important to enjoy what you're doing in life in general. So hopefully everybody out there can get enjoyment from what they're doing, like how we're getting enjoyment from this.
And here in the future, Dave and I, here in like 20 years, hopefully we're doing this in a more successful level, and we'll be going over the Dark Side of the Ring episode on this event here, right?
Oh, I cannot wait until the Dark Side of the Ring guys get into the AEW stuff.
Yeah.
I know we're probably a while off from that, but and between the NDAs and stuff that are out there, who knows how much actual stuff they'll be able to get from people because
Oh,
nobody
it's
wants
gonna
to
come
get
out.
sued.
It's gonna come out. But like always, uh, check out our Spotify, check out the YouTube, check out the Twitter, check out the Instagram. All that stuff's in the link below of what you're looking at. So again, we just appreciate it. I'm TJ,
I'm Dave. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you guys have a good rest of the week.
and we'll talk to you guys next time. Have a good one.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.